One of those first things is about because there's been a lot of discussions around the God helmets and things like this. Okay.
Mhm.
Now, I know that from the studies that we've been taking place over the years and then reevaluated years later because we didn't know what we were only getting half the story about psi enhancement technologies that the Russians were using, amongst a few other countries. And we only got little bits and bobs about, well, this is what they were trying to achieve, and they got some really good results and stuff. But there was like, well, what happened to all that, and what happened to these individuals these tests were being carried on? Well, to be honest with you, it didn't really end very well for them. A lot of them slipped down that dark road. Some of them took their own lives, to be honest with you. It's just not good. And that got to me to thinking about doing some research some years back, and about by 2014, people were well into utilizing the Korean helmet, or should we say, the God helmet, through Persinger creating this device. And he actually went on one further to create something which is like it's like an all brain sensor to
Mhm.
enhance creativity and spiritualism. And what they outlined was the essence of presence. That's how it was discussed and documented. The essence of presence. And he invited a few people, psychologists, which experienced that essence of presence. Now, the downside of this is, of course, it's still psi enhancement. So the studies that we did in 2014 thought, yeah, this isn't good. If you actually look through the proper documentation pertaining to the brain, and
Mhm.
you see, the brain it's a device that has got several layers of protection already. These several layers of protection being surrounded by blood and then the skull and then there's the skin and this, that, and the other. They're all buffers. These are all buffers to protect the brain against incursion. Now, the thing is, utilizing the psi enhancement tools is that it literally creates a direct path straight to the brain. And not utilizing those buffers don't even come into existence. You bypass them, and
Mhm.
basically you're stimulating the brain. Now, by doing this, which we realized early on, is that this stuff is causing psychological infestation
Mhm.
through the phenomena. You've just opened a door for the phenomena to directly, not not no, I mean straight directly into your brain. Now, you might say, okay, well, I'm having these essence of presence situation. Well, yeah, damn right you are, because there's a presence there, and it might feel euphoric and stuff. But when you look through the documentation, which isn't often discussed, is the
Mhm.
long-term effects of this, and this is it's not good. And that's just the normal long-term process, let alone the psychological infestation, the process, what they can do once they've got access to your brain. Those
Mhm.
buffers are there for a reason of protection. Now, people, it's the same old story, isn't it? People just dive in there, without reason, without thinking, and they're doing experiments on people. Now, some of these people, they don't know what they're involved in. They don't, it's just like, oh, I'm a guinea pig, in a sense of speaking. They think it's interesting
Mhm.
that it gives them the capabilities of maybe touching bases with some type of phenomena, and it's a new venture. It's a new venture into an area that allows them some form of direct contact. Problem is, we don't want bloody direct contact. We've got no buffering control. We've got no warning mechanisms.
Mhm.
We're out of our depth. We're just opening the door to them. When phenomena really does target individuals and wants to keep at them, they can do this without opening the door by utilizing pieces of equipment, to say, hey, coming in.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's the biggest problem. They don't know what they're doing. So we started to sort of outrule. We said, look, you know what? We don't even. I think it was by 1999, 98, 99, we'd ruled the no hypnosis policy simply because the hypnosis process is not one direction, it's two directional. So it's you might get information out, but that door is it also as a way in. So
Yes, yes.
this is the problem, and we thought, this is not good neither. We have this mechanism of buffering. We have this mechanism of control lockdown on the brain for a reason. It's the only organ in the body that has this severity of buffers, and that's got to
Hmm.
tell us something. It's got to say, okay, well, it's to stop the influence. Now, Barry
Hmm.
refers to the influence, and it's very well termed over ancient times. I mean, you've got even biblical documentation, and when you actually look at the source of the biblical information, it was written by a monk under the guidance of something.
Hmm.
And you think, well, what the hell is the something? And it's bit of a big question mark. So you have to sort of do a dive bomb into the real heavy research as to trying to figure out what is the something. And it turns out that these somethings back in that day and documented were of non-human intelligence and perceived to be many different things. There was one, as you probably know, there's one particular monk that spent lifetime in a cell writing the devil's Bible, you know? Now, what's interesting about the devil's Bible is when you look down the columns, the side, not
Hmm.
the information, but the side columns are decorative. It's a huge book as well, isn't it? You must have seen it. It's massive, yeah.
Hmm.
And you look at the symbolism. The symbolism is the rotational spirals, female and male.
Hmm.
And they're going all
Hmm.
down, decorative down there. This is exactly the same thing found carved in stone at these ancient sites all over the world as indicators to they were utilizing these places as forms of communication with the source. That information, which was put forward as symbolistic, is even in the devil's Bible. You know, it's down there, and you look at it, and it's absolutely identical. Now, some scholars will say, well, it represents frequencies. I said, well, yeah, okay, yeah, it might represent everything's frequencies, everything. You know,
Hmm.
you could see it's just like saying, oh, it's all air we breathe. Everything's frequency.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, but really, when you really corner this down, it's symbols. It's sigils and symbols of meaning,
100%.
you know?
100%.
And when we travel around the world and look at these ancient sites, if you just go to Ireland, and you look at the early discoveries of these things, the doorways into these locations were spirals, male and female. And it's even Barry, Macaulay Barry Fitzgerald, he said, look, it's about 70% of these ancient places were destroyed by their own civilization because
Hmm.
something didn't go right or they didn't like it or whatever happened regarding these communications, it got a bit out of hand. And what they did is destroy many of these places. In fact, they even went one further by burying them. Now, what are we doing in Turkey at the moment is just digging them all up. They were buried for a reason. And when you look at these things, it's symbolistic. There's all sorts of bloody altars that they're lying to the sun. Yes, yeah, okay, like many other places are. Just
Hmm.
like these ancient religions and the rising sun and stuff like that. But we're bringing them forward. We're bringing them out. We're revealing
Hmm.
these things. We're even to the point where, dare I say, activating them.
Yes, yes. Invoking, yes, at the
They're
very source.
re-invoking,
Yeah, yeah.
from ancient times. They're on a bloody good number, these things, to be honest with you, because we're doing everything for them in the name of science, in the name of knowledge, in the name of trying to understand what's what. But we have to put the key in the hole and we have to open the door to do it. And that's the
Mhm.
problem. And now you've got all these scientists that are coming together, sort of debating the fact is, where does the study go now? Well, there's no guardship, there's no protocols. What most of the worst types of contact cases through NHI communications, believe it or not, take place in Brazil. There are hundreds of these things going on, and we don't know. There is
Mhm.
no protocols. There's no guardship. There's nothing. It's just an open door,
Mhm.
and all hell breaks loose, and they're all, we're having some very terrible experiences, over here. Well, yeah, damn right you are, because you've not invoked any form of protocols. You don't know
Yep.
when to stop, and you're going to keep going and going and going until things get out of hand, and they do. And it's still going on today when I'm start looking into some of these stuff that's going on in Brazil, even current times. It's like closed door sessions, specialized ritualistic practices with no protocols,
Mhm.
offerings, that talk about trying to tantalize the phenomena. You don't realize that, what you're actually baiting here. So of course there is something very dark that sometimes comes through and it punishes the hell out of them. To them,
Yes.
it's like, oh, we don't know what's going on. I mean, hang on a second. Can't you not sort of connect the dots here a little bit? It's just
Yeah.
ridiculous. It's just ridiculous the stuff that's going on. And they still are going at it plentiful. Now, I've been in talks with a number of people from Brazil recently, and they told me about a number of cults and a number of ritualistic practices which are currently going on, but they're wrapped up in a nice shiny gold wrapper, which is as indicative of something religious. So
Mhm.
when I started to go through the details with them, I say, okay, so let's do a deep dive on what is religious here. What is it that it is that makes it religious? Was something, and every time they were saying something, I was like, well, no, it isn't. And then it was like, well, it could be. It could be. What do you mean? So you're doing all this on the offer that it could be? I said, do you not think you should know? What you're
Mhm.
actually dabbling with. You're walking into their domain blindly and hoping that it might be something good. I mean, don't get me wrong. Even the problem is now is that the guise of good,
Right.
because they're so clever. When we do some studies looking around the planet about how these things know every single religion. I mean, just a scholar alone to know every single religion on the planet is tremendous, but they know it so inside out and they know how to manipulate. And back in ancient times, they've written scriptures about, this whole society's being misled, thinking
Mhm.
they were gaining good advice, when it turns out the thing they were getting good advice from was the thing they were very battling.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
It is basically separate, divide, and conquer. And that was the process. They get in between the bricks. They gain your
Mhm.
trust. They say what you want to hear. They know they know what whispers that to tell you. And
Mhm.
then before you know it, you've gone down a complete different path. I mean, if you take for an example, there was the Battle of Sixburg Castle in France in the 12th century. Now, they've been battling, the French have been battling the Saxons for a very, very long time. And then purely by one day, there was this siege that happened, and the Saxons outnumbered the French literally 60 to 1. They had absolutely no chance of saving the Castle Sixburg. No chance. Until the phenomena turned up in the skies. They descended as two dish-shaped craft. This is the 12th century, very well documented. Um, there were scenes and drawings from the battle where they were on horses and pointing at these things. They were amazed. But what they did is they descended not towards the castle, but right next door to the castle is the church. And they descended across over to the church, and on top of that church was a crucifix, quite a large crucifix. The two crafts hovered above the church stationary and shone beams of light down onto the crucifix, which illuminated. The Saxons were so in fear that this was their god and that they were going to get God's wrath. They fled in fear, saving the castle. But when you look between the lines here, it's saying, okay, this phenomenon knows not only about the conditions of the religion, but it also knows how we would think that to be, you
Mhm.
know, and did this in a purposeful act, knowing this would be the result. Again, demonstrating time and time again that they know all these religions inside out.
Mhm.
And when we start to get into that, then it makes some sense in regarding these angelic beings turning up on battlefields and stuff, Um, and I mean, even if you talk about Fatima, I mean, the
Mhm.
great Fatima lie, as I would say,
Right.
I mean, I have actually got the original investigation documents from got it off the Vatican, with Vatican stamped investigation papers of Fatima. And it was interesting because people often think it was just one event, and it wasn't. That was the
Right.
first thing. But it gathered to, because what happened was the phenomena wanted more. It doesn't want 100 people on the top of a hill. It doesn't want, it doesn't want 1,000 people stood on a hill. It wants 70,000 people. So there was this tantalizing return and build up and all this, that, the homage was taking place and that. The story has it that the sun descended to the ground. You know, what's interesting, by the third time of this appearance, the Vatican were already there with three tripoded cameras, grabbing everything they possibly could. That information actually was submitted to the government, which immediately jumped on it, conditioned it secret, confidential. And it took years for that information to start leaking out. And some of those were photographs. Now, through the analysis of the photographs, you can see that no, it was an overcast day. The sun is up in the behind the overcast clouds, which you can clearly see, and you can
Mhm.
see the craft. This was not the sun coming down. This was something else. But they didn't know really what to explain, how to explain it.
Mhm.
Also, there's this aspect of, oh, it's all love and light situation. This thing, it literally dove at them. It just, it started, some people panicked. Some people ran off in fear. They weren't hailing this as a biblical encounter with the Virgin Mary and falling to the knees. They were running for their lives and they
Yeah.
were fleeing across the hillsides. Now, the photographs show many people there, and you can see through the analysis on the photographs that there are two forms of light there. You can see that, yes, there was sunlight buffered through the overhead amount of cloud over, it was just an over base of cloud really that day, and the sun was behind. So the light was buffered to some degree, but there was a second light source. That second light source was being emitted from the craft.
Mhm.
Now, of course, the Vatican did a number on this because what they do is you say, oh, well, it was the Virgin Mary, it was this, it was that, and it was a sign from God, and twist it to their advantage, as they usually do, just as they did with Lourdes, which we've talked about previously. Exactly the same thing.
Mhm.
St. Bernadette, in her diaries, said called I Saw That Thing, not I Saw Virgin Mary. Look, Bernadette knows what Virgin Mary would have looked like. No,
Yeah,
they're not going to
absolutely.
describe. It would be a complete insult to turn around and say that thing. But she
Yeah.
complained to the Vatican afterwards and said, look, I didn't see the Virgin Mary. But they still, oh no, no, we've got to, and made it a religious location, which it still is today. Now, people do go there and claim to be healed and all sorts of different things. It's one of the biggest places on the planet for people to go for that sort of healing and religious beliefs and stuff like that. And, sometimes there does seem to be some evidence that people are rewarded. But rewarded by what is the thing?
Mhm.
because the pretense here of, see, we've got good and, if you want to sort of go down that road, good and bad, they go back to the times of even the biblical writings, don't we? You know, it starts off pretty much as there was a war in heaven, doesn't it,
Mhm.
really?
It's a
But,
faction. Yeah,
but
absolutely.
it doesn't really go into great detail as to, well, who won?
Mm.
Who did win?
Oh.
Where's humanity in all this? Do you know what I
Mhm.
mean? We're a bit
Mhm.
sort of kept in the dark about that. Or I knew there must be information and must have been knowledge. There must have been writings further about this, but it's, and then you question, well, why is it not distributed? Why even tantalize us with the fact that the opening phrase of, yes, it started with the war in heaven, and that's it. It's like, oh yeah, quick, shut that door. Why even mention it in the first place? So there's obviously something significant that happened. According to biblical documentation, as you would know, because you specialize in this area, you know, if we're talking about the casting of Satan down and angels or fallen angels, should we say, making the earth his domain in the sense of speaking. It's interesting that the communications with NHI, when questioned, now this isn't just once, but many times now with the same response. What came first? Humans, as we are, or spirits of us? And they always say the spirit of us.
Mhm.
So when we say that, you know, we're recasting God's image, it doesn't necessarily mean physical image. If we are referring to that, is it
Mhm.
spiritual image? I mean, what are your views
That's
on that? I mean, what do you
oh
think is
my
pondered
God.
on this?
That's a whole nother show, brother. Well, God is a spirit. Um, but the idea though is that he's species unique, right? And so we would be made of the same substance, but not of the same status.
Yes,
Right. So there's it's a huge qualifier there that people get confused in.
yes.
But what is the image? It's the imitation of, or literally the image of. What is that? This gets back into some of the oldest, I guess, legends and folklore about the mixing of God and a man. Tracis Epic says the flesh of or the ghost of a man is
Mm,
made from the flesh of a god.
yeah.
What? Toy with that, right? So,
Yep.
what is that exactly? And we are seeing evidence now, like when people are astrally projecting and they're in two places at once, that the image that is being projected of them is not them,
No,
Steve.
it's not them.
It looks something completely different then. And there are people that are suggesting that that is angelic or that looks to be an angel, where it's shining. And it's like Joe McMonagle's research, right? When he's
Yep.
doing astral projection, all that, and remote viewing. But this also gets back into what an angel was. In Hebrew theology, they kind of reincorporated the malakuma and the repiuma of Ugaritic literature. Now, what the Ugaritic literature says about angels, malakuma was deceased ancestor. It
Mm,
was somebody that had transitioned
yeah.
and they existed out of body.
Mm.
And then even their term malakuma, which was then malakim in Hebrew theology for angel, that also meant deceased ancestor. And it's got me in a lot of trouble, Steve, because I've been trying to tell people that we might be looking at consciousness here.
Oh, yeah. There you have it. Absolutely. I do agree.
And yeah, then that's where I'm at with it because it's the angel aspect of it, it's the rephium aspect of it, and it's
It
there's
does
so
get,
much there.
it really does get complicated because the average Joe Bloggs in the 21st century just simply wants to know one question.
Yeah.
Is the good and is the bad?
Mhm.
I wish we could just say, give that an answer. But everything's intertwined so much now that and you've got deception and of things which are misleading.
Mhm.
It's become a time when have we truly lost our way of censoring and understanding what is true goodness and what is deceptive? Because we are puppets on a string to a degree with this phenomena, and it can dangle any emotion and any visual stimulation in front of you. And these are the things that we have to rely on to gain a
Mhm.
judgment. And this is the
Yes.
problem. Maybe there was a time when, things like that were good in the sense of speaking. Euphoric, good experiences, teaching, spiritual, and all that sort of thing. But I think seemingly things have changed to the point now where the humanity is now in the 21st century is mass confusion, absolute mass
Yeah.
confusion. Nobody knows which way to turn, what to believe. You can't trust their ears, they can't trust their eyes.
Hmm.
People are being purposely misled by phenomena, the influence. Is a right battlefield going on out there,
Oh
which
yeah.
is really confusing because us humans are really limited to the point where we have to just use our eyes, our ears, our sensory intakes, anything to try and discern the difference. And that's very
Right.
hard because now the phenomena is mastered humanity to the point where you can't trust anything. And now we know that phenomena will purposely and can easily target individuals. And we know that through some of the research that Barry did in regarding some of the testability, the testing the phenomena,
Hmm.
that we can lose the discernment at least at 20 seconds. I mean, how
Yep.
fast is that?
Ian, it's incredible because, and I don't want to interrupt you, but real quick, here's the problem we're having. At that point, everything can be manipulated.
Yeah,
The memory of the interface event can be completely constructed on the part of the phenomenon.
yeah.
And then the phenomenon will stretch itself so long in that individual's life rather, where like the next 3 months, they're seeing synchronicities that reaffirm the memory that was implanted.
Yes,
So, right, even though the memory of what happened that never actually occurred, the phenomenon circling back to
yes,
reaffirm their perception of the event.
yeah.
So that's how dangerous it can be.
It really is. So we have to sort out at some point, no matter how long we might battle down this path, yourself, me, and others, it's come to the conclusion that this is never going to be just black and white. We're never going to be able to just say to somebody, it is this,
Mhm.
because the methods of deception is so high now, is that confusion and absurdity is being delivered on purpose to evade,
Yeah.
and it's the greatest, I have to say, it is the most significant way to have tackled this. If you want to wipe out, the essence of goodness or the perception of goodness, then all you have to do is be a wolf in sheep's clothing,
Yeah.
and then it gets to people where, well, you can't trust that. Don't go near that. Don't do that. But then within that could be some of the goodness. So they turn to the other
Yeah.
side. They've just steered you in the direction in a very, very clever way. It doesn't have to be forcefully grab your face and turn your face in this direction. It's just it's the influence, it's the mechanism, it's how it gets to people, and it's working them. Now it's working them to the
Wow.
point where it's bled because there was these sort of big questions. I've just got a couple here actually, which we laid out some years ago, about you know just how far back does this phenomena go. Well, it's seemingly as long as we know it predates biblical documentation. So did the ancient ancestors, because people talk about ancient ancestors, they have contact with non-human entities. Well, yeah, absolutely they did. No different than
Mhm.
modern day society. There's no difference. Did the Catholic faith, here we go, did the Catholic faith and others utilize these experiences and encounters, giving them a more meaningful religious connotation, refitting to a sign of the times? Oh, yes, they
Ooh.
did. Yeah,
And it
absolutely.
may very well be the phenomenons designed for that to happen, right? To
Yeah,
hijack, use the false doctrine to promote some kind of version
yeah.
that was never really true at all. And I've noticed that within exorcisms, where if the exorcism was unsuccessful, they didn't know what to do with it.
Mm,
And Sinistraria of Amino was He met an entity on a dirt road, Steve. He's like, well, what do I do with this thing? So he's reaching around his bag and everything. He's got his amulet, he's got his holy water, and he right again, he's trying to frame the phenomenon. Where are
Yeah.
you at? What can I do with you? And the entity just like, well, no, doesn't really matter. Appreciate you. Thank
Yeah.
you, Father. I'm gonna go get some food, right? And he's like, well, crap, what do I do now?
Yeah.
And you're right, and here's what's dangerous is because we don't know what we don't know. The Library of Alexandria burned to crisp. The Vatican has, the most, I guess, archival information on this stuff. And
Yeah.
if they have the most archival information, what have they manipulated
Yeah.
and
Exactly.
lied to us about?
I know.
Is
It's a tremendous. I mean, the amount of information that they're sat on is ridiculous to the point where 53 miles of library underneath the Vatican was not big enough. They had to have other locations around the world to store the material underground. And 53 miles of it is not enough. And you think, well, why are they sat on so much information? But the thing is, you have to consider the fact that, we're not, people aren't stupid, surely, and they must know, yes, there's aspects of this in our religion, which is that we know there's something is something else. So why not just discard it? Because that's what makes it a little bit hypocritical, isn't it, really? Because it was like there's God's word and only God's word. But then they've got this and they're sat on information, documentation, and it's been intertwined purposely. Why even take something which they know, absolutely
Mhm.
know, is not a spiritual, godly encounter and twist it to their advantage when they should have just gone, oh, get out
Right, right.
and don't
Whatever
come
that
back.
is. Absolutely. And again, it seems to me that they try to consolidate power. And I'm not like, right,
Yep.
frame it as, oh, yeah, well, it does fit in our belief system.
Yep.
Not theirs, but it's ours. And now you have a good explanation for the phenomenon because you kind of authored it, didn't you? It's a part of your religion. And that's deception. Um,
It is.
but you're right. It's a fascinating subject.
If it's like the core of religion, you've got to dig deep, haven't you, to find the roots. But some of those roots are not always what you think they're going to be, and that's the problem, is that it's based on older things and older things and older things. Maybe they were once interpreted as that was the acts of God. But clearly when you talk about experiences from nuns and monks, practices of this Catholic religion and many other different religions being targeted by phenomena which is definitely nothing nice to be guised as
Mhm.
something religious, it becomes a
There
real
we go.
issue. Yeah,
Absolutely. Like you said with the case study you mentioned earlier, where the craft was shining a light through the cross,
yeah. And it was
knowing
used.
how these people would perceive it.
That's it.
That
It,
is a terrifying, terrifying implication, brother.
it
Oh
just
my
goes to
goodness.
show that they know the religions, and it's not just the Catholic faith, there's many other faiths around the world where they've manipulated through belief that, this
That's
is indicative of something religious when it isn't. It's just used as their practice to gain, and whatever they wanted to gain. Because they know, like us, like sheepdogs, are always going to run after sheep. That they seem to know, let's do this because this is managing the situation, but the way
mhm.
we want to manage it through religious beliefs that they're aware of what we believe. And will actually
Yeah.
actually act that out. Incidents will be acted out. Wars have been spiked against other societies because of this very same process.
Mhm.
If we talk about Alexander the Great, who apparently gained access, and obtained assistance from them to bring down walls the size of Jericho, to be able to besiege cities on their behalf.
Absolutely. Yeah,
So
that
yeah,
transcended their scientific method
yeah,
in order to adjust history. If you were
adjust
left your
history.
own guys is right, you'll never be able to accomplish this. But it's my desire for you to accomplish it.
That's it.
I'm going to give you assistance. And that individual goes around being written in history. It's like I'm Alexander the Great. It's like, no, you're Alexander the Good.
Yeah.
Whatever that was out there helped you. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
oh, exactly.
Um,
Yeah, and then they list these individuals as, well, these were the work of gods and symbolistic with horns and things, the horns of light and all
Yeah.
sorts of different
Yeah.
stuff. And you think to yourself, well, what makes these people special? It was same for Moses, should we say, and the symbolism of all that and the Ark of the Covenant and all that sort of a thing. I mean, the Ark of the Covenant stories don't seem to be end up very good, to be honest with you. I mean, the Ark could be ARC, such as so many people apparently died that
Right. Touch
came
it, you're
into
done.
apparently contact with these things. Now, I was reading some biblical scriptures about a month or so ago, old stuff, which referenced like five very different, how can I put this, priesthoods.
Mhm.
And they were trying to find, is there a certain priesthood that would be able to
To
transport
carry
the
the,
ark
yes. Yep.
in a safer way? Because
Hmm.
most people weren't having great experiences moving the
Yeah.
ark from one place to another. And then
Hmm.
and then they realized there was one particular group, and they thought, okay. And they did some studies, and they thought, well, maybe it's down to the blood group. So they emphasized their blood group. Oh, you can't breed with this person. You can't have children with that person. It's got to keep the blood group going because it's something, has some type of religious thing. I don't know. I don't know. I've not done any of the science on sort of things. But the fact is that it's what they thought was interesting is
Hmm.
because they're thinking to themselves, there's a particular priesthood that
Yeah.
is different and capable of dealing with this type of phenomena in a
You know
biological
what's
sense.
you're exactly right. What's so interesting about that, because I grew up in evangelicalism, that's still in a different way. It's still being included in that religion, that religious system, right? Um, where like I know pastors who and they had very qualified individuals in their church that could have taken their church over from them at the point of their retirement. But they would rather raise their other son up who has zero qualifications, zero desire to pastor. But this is sick, I know, but they
Yeah,
believed,
yeah.
right? Well, it's bloodline.
It,
It's
in the
still going
bloodline,
on.
still going
Yeah.
on. I know. I know. And it's gone very, it's gone very secret now. I mean, they were quite a bit more open in them there, and then everything just went plateaued and went black. All the
Mhm.
information pertaining from now on in regarding following this bloodline and its association with phenomena has to go black, has to go secret, all that sort of thing. You know, I mean, look, even the Templars were trying to be discoveраtive. They were trying to work out where does the line lie between what is good and what is bad or perceived to be good and bad.
Right.
And they end up, some of them in ritualistic homage to things that you might consider satanic, or the horned beasts and stuff, and they get burnt alive outside Notre Dame for doing this. But they were
Mhm.
kind of saying, but it's all kind of one thing. And then when it was discovered, it was like, oh no, 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 you were the bad boys. You were doing something you shouldn't do. Let's burn them at the stake outside Notre Dame. So they wanted to make a clear define then that yes, there is this, but you don't do that. And then, but
Right.
there is this, and that's okay. But even the Templars were trying to figure out it. The same question that people are trying to figure out today. How can when it goes like this and stuff? How do you define a straight line through it? It's entwined.
It it is reminiscent of it's reminiscent rather of Michael Heiser's work where he wrote a book called The Unseen Realm, and he started to highlight these different nuances of the phenomenon where yes, a lot of them do seem to be the same. In getting back to your point about the war in heaven, he said, look, he's like, the fact is there are other gods.
Yeah.
There are little g's. They're
Yes.
little g's. They want everything that the Yahweh has the same way.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah.
And so, but that answers the question, right? Well, the war has never ended. No, it's still going on. It's going on right now.
Oh
And
yeah.
it gets back to my earliest research in hybridism and one of my biggest arguments with the Nephilim hypothesis. Well, if that is a when angels fell, we're still having hybridism today. Are angels still
Oh,
falling?
Well, yeah,
And if they're still falling, that really destroys
it
a
does
lot of
that
what we
concept.
thought was
Yeah.
going.
It,
Absolutely.
yeah.